Okay, hi everyone. This is a little short video for this week to introduce the main themes and the things I want us to look out for in the readings and in the discussion group. If you've done the readings by now, you'll notice they're a lot different than the first chapter from Van Hooser that I asked you to read. The first chapter was very theologically dense. He introduced a lot of ideas. He didn't really do much along in the way of reading culture or interpreting cultural texts or artifacts, but he laid the theological or philosophical foundation for what we're trying to do here. He defined culture, and I really like his definition. He defines it as a work and a world. A work meaning every cultural artifact, everything in culture is something that human beings have created. Of course, whether it's art, science, government, and even things like languages or culinary styles. These are all things that have been created by human beings. Okay, but also it's a world. Everyone is born into a certain world, and we're shaped by it. We're socialized into it. There are certain values that become a part of culture, and as we're raised in the culture, we take on these values. They shape how we see the world. They shape our it becomes a lens through which we view the world, a certain set of things that we're looking for, things that we pay attention to, a certain set of historical conditions that have shaped us, and things like that. So culture is simultaneously something that human beings have created, but in a very real sense, it's also something that creates human beings, or it shapes the way we think and we see the world. So that's the key that I want you to get from the Van Hooser chapter. Culture is a work and a world. It is something that is created, and it's something that also creates human beings in part. Okay, and then he gave a few more thoughts on how to read culture and different types of speech acts and that kind of thing. But the most important thing is culture is a work and a world. And what I want us to pay attention to for the next couple of weeks is the world aspect of culture, the ways in which culture shapes us, the ways in which cultural artifacts promote messages or values that, without even thinking, we might accept and internalize. Okay, so I want us to think about that, and I want us to think about this by starting to think about aspects of culture and trying to figure out what exactly they are saying about the world. So the 3 chapters that we're reading for this week, 2, 4, and 6, I believe, what these chapters do, they look at a movie, Gladiator, an important political human rights document, and then mundane things we might see in the checkout aisle at a grocery store. And each chapter takes these things and they try to say, what are these things saying about the good life? Or what are these things saying about what is important, what is good, what is bad? What messages are these cultural artifacts or texts conveying about what kinds of things we should pursue? Okay, so, and then these chapters, they draw out these themes and messages from these artifacts, and then they respond to them from a biblical or Christian perspective. So you can read the chapters for yourselves to see what they say about those things. But in this video, I want to do the same thing with a little, even more of a trivial example, something that I like to do in classes. This video won't be as interactive as I've done before, but I hope it'll get the same message across. I like to ask my students about HOV lanes, carpool lanes. Right? In heavily congested areas, there will sometimes be a certain lane with a sign with a diamond, and it says HOV, which stands for High Occupancy Vehicle, I believe. And in order to drive in these lanes, you need to have at least 2 people in your vehicle. So I start off by explaining the concept of an HOV lane or a carpool lane, and then I ask the question, what are HOV lanes saying about the good life? What are these? What messages do these convey? What values are communicated by the existence of HOV lanes? And the 2 answers that I usually get, first are time. We think that time is important. The reason HOV lanes work is because people don't want to be late for work. We want to shave 5 or 10 minutes off our commute. And why is that important? Well, because most of us in Western culture think that time is a very important thing. We don't want to, quote, waste time. We think that 5 minutes spent in the car is a waste of time. We'd rather be at work being productive, or at home with family, or whatever we want to do. But those 5 or 10 minutes that we can save is very important to us. And I realized how much of a Western cultural idea this is when I was 18. I lived in a very small mobile home trailer with 5 other roommates, and 2 of them were from Africa. They just come to Canada from Africa a few months, maybe about a year before that. They were fairly recent. One was from Kenya and one was from Nigeria. And what I noticed with these 2 friends of mine, Mike and John, they had a different sense of the importance of time, and they jokingly called it African time. Right? We in the West, if you're late somewhere by a minute, it's a big deal. I was once 1 minute late for a job interview, and the interviewer made note of the fact that I was 1 minute late. I was about 30 seconds past 4 o'clock, so it was 4:01, but because the clock said 4:01, I was on the wrong side of that artificial boundary we've set up, and that was a big deal. I still got the job because I had some relevant experience, but 30 seconds one way or the other somehow matters, because in the West we've divided our days up, and we've done it everywhere now, but hours, minutes, seconds, and sometimes being on the wrong side of a boundary, even by 30 seconds, is a big deal. And my 2 roommates, Mike and John, they didn't have this sense of time, which was sometimes frustrating, but it was sometimes refreshing. They didn't care too much if we were a little bit late for a meeting with them or something like that, because their sense of time, their way of looking at time was completely different. So all that to say, I think HOV lanes communicate the importance of time and timeliness, and not wasting time, and being at work on time. If you're late for work by 2 minutes, that's not really going to affect your productivity, but a number of bosses that I've had, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way, we've all had a few bosses that will notice if we're 2 minutes late, even though technically it doesn't really make a difference. But the way that we think about time in the West is very much, be here on time, and if you're a little bit late, then it's a big deal. So I think HOV lanes communicate this message of the importance of time and not wasting it. The other message that HOV lanes sometimes communicate, or that the existence of HOV lanes communicates, rather, is environmental protection. The reason we have HOV lanes is because we want fewer cars on the road, we want less pollution. If we didn't care about how much pollution there was, how much exhaust was going into the atmosphere, we probably wouldn't have HOV lanes. So the fact that we have HOV lanes communicates the idea that at least some of us, or some people in Western culture, and it's becoming more of a dominant idea, want to be careful with what we're putting into the environment. That's why we have HOV lanes. So the reason they work is because people want to save time in their commute, because it feels like a waste of time. So time is important, and that's why HOV lanes are effective, and we have them. The purpose that they serve is to reduce the number of cars on the road. At least hopefully. I haven't seen any studies to see whether or not that happens, but the goal that we have in allowing HOV lanes is to encourage people to carpool to save on pollution. Okay, so this is the first step of reading culture. This is what the 3 authors that we're reading this week do. They look at a cultural text and they try to say, okay, what is this communicating about the good life? What is this saying about what is good, or what we should value, or important themes like that? So the first step is to figure out, or to interpret the text, the cultural text. What is this saying about what is important? The second step is to respond to it from a Christian or biblical perspective. I'm not going to do that with HOV lanes, and I won't tell you what the authors have to say about the themes they look at. But once you've identified, okay, time, the importance of time and the precision of time, and how important it is to be on the right side of the hourly or minute boundaries, you can maybe respond to that from a Christian perspective. Now we've identified time. What does the Bible say about time? Well, it says a number of things. From a time for, in Ecclesiastes, we read that there's a time for all things, a time to laugh, a time to cry, a time for peace, a time for war, and so on and so forth. So maybe you could look at that and find some response to the message of time from HOV lanes. You could find a passage about wasting time, or the importance of time, or something like that. So, but once you've identified the theme of time, you know what to look for in responding to HOV lanes. Same with the environment. You could maybe look at the first few chapters of Genesis and find God telling Adam and Eve to be stewards or caretakers of the environment, and you could maybe agree with the environmental message of HOV lanes, or you could maybe disagree. It depends. So it depends on the interpretation and what exact passage you want to do, or you want to look at and base your response on. But the important thing for this type of task is to identify the theme that you are getting from a cultural artifact. It's also important because this is what I'll ask you to do for your movie review. I'll ask you to watch a movie, try to pull out some of the themes that the movie is communicating, and then respond to it. So this week, we're getting a little bit of practice doing that. In particular, the movie review of Gladiator, I would encourage you to pay a lot of attention to that, because I think that's an excellent movie review. So a great movie review, an A+ movie review, would do everything that this Gladiator movie review does, and it would do it well. So when you're looking for help for your movie review, start with the chapter on the movie Gladiator, read it, figure out what he does, how he does it, and that kind of thing, because that's what I'm looking for. But the basic theme is the same whether you're looking at HOV lanes or a movie or a political document. What is this saying about the good life? What is the theme or the message? And then what does the Bible, what does Christianity have to say about this message? Does it agree? Does it disagree? Or something like that. Okay, so that's what I want us to think about this week. Reading culture, finding the themes implicit in cultural artifacts, and then figuring out a strategy for responding to them thoughtfully, insightfully, and biblically. So that's what I want us to do this week. By the time you're watching this, you probably will already have seen the questions that I posted on my courses on the forum. So, well, thanks for watching the video, and I really enjoyed the forum discussions we had last week. I look forward to more of the same this week. But again, this video was just to highlight some of the main themes and the things that I want us to get some practice doing and thinking about this week to prepare for the movie review. Okay, thanks for watching.